Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. I love when we have guests who, well, of course, we want them back, but they also want to come back also. That's always a good thing, right, Jerri? I think it's a good sign.
It's a great thing.
Repeat offenders.
Especially when we have guests of the caliber of our guests today.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I love when we can make, we talk a lot about K-12, but we really need to have that continuing conversation about higher ed. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today.
We sure are. So back with us today is Cameron McCoy. He's starting his second year as Provost of Shenandoah University. And as we were getting ready to start the show today, he came on and we looked at the picture and his background, and Marvin, our producer, is like, oh my gosh, that bike is awesome. And I'm like, tell me about the desk in the background.
I missed all of this.
And you missed all of this.
Yeah.
So Cameron, we're going to pull you on screen and say hello and welcome back to LinkedUp. We are glad to have you back here with us. And I would like for you to tell us a little bit about your office. Your office is very unique. And the thing I love about it is there's so much meaning in everything that's right there. So tell us the story. I love the story.
Well, thank you for having me back. First of all, it's a joy to see you guys again, and always a pleasure.
Oh, it's great.
I appreciate all of your work, and it's an honor to be back. So the desks. I'm a big believer in remembering or celebrating where we've come from. I call it timeless versus timely, and I think we often get in a little bit of a rush to get to the timely stuff, and forget about the timelessness. And certainly there are other parts of higher education in particular that really want to just hold on to timeless and never change.
Sure.
Right? I think we've got to have both. So my predecessor, I came to visit with her in this very office, actually, and she had these three doors that were sitting up against that wall, actually, where the bike is and the whiteboard is, and she asked me if I wanted them, and she had pulled them as a representation of a speech that she had heard that had three different meanings, three different doors. And so I said, absolutely, I would love to have them. And so now they are, well, there's one more coming. I haven't quite built it yet, but they are now representative of three words that are important to me. And one of the things that I've been really pushing hard on at Shenandoah is for us to remember to center our learners. And so the desk behind me with the wall centered that has diplomas on it is around learning and centering learning. This table that I'm sitting at here, you can't really see the whole thing, but this one's about centering equity. We're all coming around the table equally and sharing. And then the one that will sit sort of over in this space here is going to be what's called a tensegrity table. I'll let your listeners Google that. But yes. It will look like it's floating. And so that one's about centering trust.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And so these are all made from those doors.
From those doors.
Who made those for you?
So one of our folks in the conservatory, we have a huge conservatory at Shenandoah, world class. And so we do a lot of set design. We have all the equipment you need to do woodworking and whatnot. And so we collaborated on this desk, which is actually the pieces and parts of it. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's a ladder right here. And then over here are some apple crates. Those are all from the Shenandoah Valley, which is known for its apples and apple farming. So those are pieces and parts that were sort of captured from an old farm, and so we designed and put this guy together as a standing desk. And then this one we ended up making out of black pipe, and then cut portions of the door out so I can actually slide in some historical representations of the university. See them as you're sitting at the desk. But it turns out that, we also wanted to put some glass tops on them, and I just actually end up using it as a whiteboard as I
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's so meaningful and visionary at the same time, because you're connecting to, what you expect in yourself, in your students, in the school community, and moving forward. That's amazing. That's amazing. Do you get to have a lot of people in your office?
Always. Yeah, very often, actually. And that's important to me. I love to go see them and be a part of the community as well. But, it just turns out in the run of a day, people want to come here, and that's what I want them to do. I actually have 3 very large whiteboards around the room. Most of the time they're full, but those are used as we ideate and work together and collaborate and try to find opportunities to grow and be together. And we even knocked down a wall. There used to be a wall. You can't see this, but right behind my screen here, there's a door that enters into this office space. And there used to be a wall that ran down one side of it, so you had to sit in this little waiting room and go around and then talk to the executive assistant. And we just knocked the wall down, and people went, "Whoa, what's happening?" And my lens on it is, look, this is not my office. This is the faculty's office.
Right.
Let's open it up. And we're not trying to hide.
That's awesome. Open door policy to a room full of doors with inspiration. I love it.
Yes. A door can be anything, right?
That's right. That's right. Oh, that's excellent.
It definitely looks different than it did last year. Complete change.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I guess I was thinking
yeah.
that was your home office before. No, it wasn't. It was your work office. Yeah, this is completely different.
Yes.
No, good. Yeah, I was trying to remember whether I was in my home office or not, which is a totally different design.
Well, you were just starting in this role as we spoke. So this is a perfect time to meet. And, now obviously we see that you're super collaborative. It seems that you really like to work with others to move thinking forward. What are some of the initiatives that you're working on? What is happening in higher ed? What are you trying to do right now?
I wish you guys could see this whiteboard, because that's
it's small.
Yes, and it's one we don't erase. We just add to it with a little section over here that we call the navigation line, or the nagavation line is what I like to call it.
Oh my gosh, I'm writing things down as you come up with them.
Yeah, maybe I'll flip it around in a minute and you guys can see it. But sort of importantly, one of the things I really truly appreciate about this institution and our faculty and staff, and certainly our leadership, is we're not afraid to be future focused. I think I've known that from the beginning. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come here. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of work to do and to transition and build regenerative capacity. And so, the way we're sort of working on this and thinking about how do we evolve is to take a few cues from some of my peers in the higher ed space, and some presidents out there as well who've made some transitions, but to try to do it in the context of Shenandoah. And so, some of those cues are from folks like Clay Christensen, so rest his soul. But Paul LeBlanc, I think, probably knew him best and implemented some of his thoughts around the innovator's dilemma. And a guy by the name of Michael Arena, who wrote about adaptive space. I'm not sure if we've talked about that one before, but effectively saying that your institution gets really, really good at the stuff it does, and it gets hyper efficient because it has to, and is encouraged to, but all new ideas then get crushed by the efficiency machine. So
yes,
you need kind of the adaptive space to, whether that's mental, physical, or schedule. Having that adaptive space becomes really important. And then another offshoot of Clay is a guy by the name of Clark Gilbert, and his co-authors wrote about something called dual transformation. And so we've really been putting those things together to understand this in the context of Shenandoah. How might we adapt and grow and shift our existing institutions? So we'll call that University A, and really understand its data and its challenges and its persistence rates for our learners and its organizational structure to recognize where we are today and how might we adapt to move forward. But in the construct of dual transformation, that means adapting our current business model to serve the markets that we serve already, the types of learners that we already know and that we do a good job of serving. And I think what I find really profound about Shenandoah is that it's got a superpower in its ability to launch new programs to serve the markets that we serve. We're in the midst of launching everything from engineering to visual arts to One Health. But we have robust programs in AR, VR, XR, machine learning, and we have the oldest esports academic program in the nation. And yet we also have this really powerful and capable conservatory, the highest NCLEX scores for nursing in the state of Virginia. And then, pharmacy and health professions that are constantly evolving. So we have a really great foundation, but we have to continue to evolve it, right? So the big initiative there is trying to understand what the transitional structures need to be to allow us to position for a future.
Why do you think that your school has this superpower for launching new you seem to be doing a lot, yet a lot of times initiatives, some great ideas happen, but then they kind of get in their own way to get things going, and hindrances are, what is up in front without getting around them. What is the trick here? What is the secret?
I think, first of all, it's attributable to our faculty. They are very willing to think about new programs and to harness their own innovation and entrepreneurial thinking to chase new things. I mean, we have a performing arts medicine certificate as a part of our athletic training program. Who does that, right? But that's athletic training for dancers and musicians.
Of course,
actors,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Right? And so understanding kind of who we are and how we bring that to bear. And one of our programs launching this fall is a certificate in esports athletic training.
Yeah.
Right?
Love that.
Yes.
Who does that, right? And so
That's
that kind of
great.
stuff, right? That comes from our faculty. I think at the same time, there's a market necessity out there for us to be able to continue to grow and adapt. And this is before I got here. It's a token to my predecessor and certainly President Fitzsimmons that we're able to sort of see the tea leaves a little bit and not be afraid to go try things, like esports as an example, right? And so, we do a lot of those things, and in some ways, that's a really powerful tool for us. And my challenge is to help us continue to do that and adapt. And it's, we're a private institution, so that's helpful to us. Understanding accreditation and how do you navigate that is important. And having supportive trustees who, have some of their own ideas, but also are really encouraging to us. All those things are super important to stabilizing and progressing University A. And at the same time, we have to build University B. And that's the real fun part, right? Trying to understand, how do I serve a market that we don't serve at all today? And then how do I bring those things back together? What's the connective tissue? Or what Gilbert calls the capacities link. And so we've spent quite a bit of time this past year, building the infrastructure necessary to do that. So the technological underpinnings, the capacities in delivering fully active online education, and certainly, and maybe most importantly, and this is the one that I certainly don't want to overlook, and that is an ability to do formative assessment versus summative assessment. Right. And that I think is going to be a key to our future as an institution, because that then gives us the ability to say, well, Jerri is learned ethical reasoning in her first year seminar, but then she went and did an athletics program. So she was a student athlete, and then she went abroad for a while, and she did this coursework and that coursework, in-class, hybrid, online, whatever it is. And can we then say, can we measure Jerri's formative development over the course of her time at Shenandoah and affirm a capacity for ethical reasoning? There aren't other institutions that are thinking about it that way that I'm aware of. If there are, I would love to invite them in so we can collaborate. But really importantly, having that ability to do formative assessment is part and parcel to our future, and a big piece of the engine that can drive University B as we explore different learners who we might serve.
So connected to the learners, and I think that's the key, because that that formative assessment piece is the driver for success in learners. So I think it's so important that that's not something that is skirted over, but instead a main focus, because it should always be about the students. And sometimes I think that's what I'm hearing from you is the importance of, yes, being a visionary, and that innovation comes from that risk taking, right? It comes from trust and that connection to the students. It's key. It really is. We can't just do things for the sake of doing them. We have to do them for the students and listen to their needs, and that's where that formative comes in.
Yep, exactly.
Am I hearing a little bit of blockchain and credentialing in there?
Oh yeah.
As you're talking.
Oh yeah, it's still there. We're headed that. I mean, that's one of the quote unquote big projects that we're kind of undertaking, and really grateful for some partnerships that we have with institutions like Motlow State Community College in Nashville, working together with them and the Learning Economy Foundation to sort of really try to understand what does it mean when you are truly learner centric and you can credential whether it's one credit, one competency, or the full pathway to a degree. And we're inviting some other partners into that enterprise as well. An organization called Cyberbytes Foundation. We're exploring their ideas and collaborations, just to understand how they're doing the work they're doing, and some other institutions in Virginia, including high schools, to really what does this look like if you can sort of do the quote unquote big blur, as my friends at JFF like to call it, where it doesn't necessarily matter that you spend the entirety of a 4-year experience in our residential campus. I mean, let's do that.
Right.
But let's also recognize there are all sorts of learners out there, including our own, who have graduated, who we might want to re-engage. So grateful for even, the other day we signed a relationship with Amazon to be part of their career choice effort. So, just recognizing this as an ecosystem becomes super important as we position ourselves to adapt and grow and serve learners across the nation.
I just wonder when you sleep, Cameron, because you have so many things going on. And I have heard you speak several times, and I love to hear you speak, because you always push my thinking forward and make me think about different things. But one of the things that you've spoken about quite a bit is leading the way away from process-oriented mindsets towards platform-focused leadership.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that in layman's terms? What does that mean? And what would an example of that be?
Well, think about the way that we serve today. So, we just talked about blockchain a little bit. So let me just give you the process example.
Okay.
Right now, Jamie, you're about to drop number 2 off at Georgia Tech, right?
Yes.
And so when you go down there, the process of getting into Georgia Tech, or the process of getting into Shenandoah, or pick your institution, there is a process for that. And some organizations have started to, like us, we're a common app school. Great. A lot of schools are May 1st schools, they're called. So you have to make your decision by May 1. That's a process. And all of the documentation that I'm sure that your learner had to go through just to even get into to Georgia Tech is intense, right? And that in and of itself is a process. And then you get into our institutions, you climb over our ivy covered walls, and now you're in, right? And there we have a whole series of processes too, right? And one of those processes is the pathway to a degree. 3 credit hour tranches up to 120. But what happens if you leave, right? If you leave in the middle of it, you don't get any return on your education, right? You just carry with you whatever debt you have. Yeah. And that I find to be really, really unfortunate, but that's the process, how it is today, right? You're also not getting any learning or recognition for experiential activity, whether that's an internship or a residential opportunity where we do other teaching. And then, of course, once you graduate and you climb over our other ivy covered wall, you cross our stage, we give you a diploma and turn around and ask you for money. Right? That's our process.
Right.
And so that idea of the process to education and as we've couched it in our society is the process to the middle class, which is becoming less and less true, is really damaging and not equity driven in any way, shape, or form. In fact, we're incented to be exclusive rather than inclusive. It becomes this sort of finite game of education, which you are trying to win by going to the most prestigious school. And if you do that, you get in, just getting in is the win, right? And then you get the degree. And so just thinking about that as a process, I think is really, really unfortunate. And it's built around a system that is for many reasons broken and certainly doesn't serve the majority of our population, unfortunately. So the question becomes, well, how do we break that apart and offer this platform idea of service? You just think about accessing education when you need it. Now, you could go extreme, and I don't know if it's necessarily the same kind of a fad as the MOOC was, but there's a number of companies that are out there that are delivering education, right? But it's not credentialed. So is that truly a platform? Well, us as institutions with accreditation and tradition and assessments of quality and all the talented faculty that we have, might we think about being able to recognize learning where learning occurs to be your platform for learning over the course of your life? And that requires us to sort of have a more infinite mentality, infinite game mentality, so to speak, to say, education is for everybody. How do we invite more people in and adjust our rules to be able to do that? Because process requires very specific rules, and a platform requires a much broader lens on what those rules mean and when.
Yes, much more equitable. Much more equitable. I like that.
Definitely much more equitable. And I also think that it's because it's so broad, it gives that opportunity for innovation and growth and looking at new ways of doing anything or things. But also, I think, and maybe this goes back to my original question, some schools may have this mindset, others may not, or others may have this mindset but don't know how to get it forward. And I think a lot of it just has to do with, well, this is the way we've always done it, so this is the way we're going to do it. And not actually, maybe this pandemic was here partly for us to open our eyes and be able to see how things can be done in new ways. And instead of jumping back to those old ways, let's stop, let's be reflective and find ways that we can embrace new ways of things that we did and try to evolve instead of continually going back. It's our chance now to really say, let's look at other ways instead of saying, well, we've always done it this way, so this is the way we're going to do it. It's tradition, it's history, it's the way it's the way we do things. How do we get out of that mindset? It's so hard.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just think about the K through 12 space where you guys spend a lot of time. how quickly
Right.
did we try to get back to
Yeah.
school starts at 7:45?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, all of the data show that, first of all, there are more two-parent working families.
Yeah.
Where both parents work now than there ever were in our society's time. And second of all, there are enormous amounts of data around the development of young people to their, through their 22nd year of life, right? That they need more sleep, period.
Right.
And
Right.
we're designed around this sort of nuclear family. Dad goes to work, and because of that, kid has to get on a bus at a certain time and come home at a certain time. So we didn't make hardly any changes in the K through 12 space either, and I think that's really frightening. When we can start to understand that learners today learn totally differently than we did.
And adults do too.
Totally, right. And so that requires us to be really thoughtful about modalities. It requires us to be thoughtful about the construct of learning and the pedagogical approaches. And so I'm a huge believer in the fully active learning lens, whether that's online, hybrid, or otherwise. And super grateful for some of our partners like Minerva helping us work through that and developing the capacity, because if we don't, higher ed becomes less relevant and certainly has already lost much of its voice in the public square. And we've got to get that back, right? And so I think, the crux of the question is, are there some examples out there of institutions that are driving some of this change? And how do you navigate around the dismissiveness that we normally find, right? I mean, I could point to Southern New Hampshire University and the way that they facilitated change. And immediately most of my colleagues are going to say, oh no, massive online, huge institution, that's not us. We're not going to do online education. And you're missing the forest for the trees, right? I mean, you're missing the fact that what they did was they rewrote the rules so they could include more learners. But they went down the street 3 miles so they could do that, right? That they're really celebrating the strengths of certain faculty in their teaching capacity and their curriculum development capacity or otherwise, right? And that they're going into communities to serve them in their communities. And there are so many examples, not just from them, but from some others, that institutions like ours could recognize and honor and then contextualize without having to be a 150,000 learner institution. It's not who we are, it's not who we want to be, but there's still some learnings that we can take from it. Same thing with right here in Winchester, we've got a local high school that created something called the Shahada Innovation Center that is an old middle school, and they converted it. And so students who are in high school can go up above the existing high school. This is Hanley High School. And there are no bells for classes. It's a little college-y. Like the kids, go into their courses on time, and they're doing things that are everything from woodworking and set design to esports to machine learning to nursing. I mean, they're doing all of those things in this building, and it's just a different way to teach in the high school. And just down the hill at the Hanley High School, the other teachers are, sort of still struggling with the concept, and that's not their fault. It's just the environment that they're used to, right? And so it's really challenging to celebrate those shifts when it's easy to dismiss them, right? Because they're so unfamiliar.
Right.
Certainly, that's a big challenge of our society today, more broadly, of course, right?
Doing what's easy. And I think part of the trick of breaking the cycle and moving toward innovation is what we're seeing right here, the collaborative space that you have for pushing ideas forward in your office specifically. I think that is really what we should see. You're literally breaking down walls in order to force dialogue, communication, collaboration, all of those things that we want students to do. Why? Because it pushes us forward, and I think that's part of the trick for breaking the cycles that we see, and you're moving out of what's easy, right, and moving instead to
it's so true. And I think one of the things that is always a foundational element for me is this idea of a person-centric leadership development. And I say that because we can't break down any walls. I mean, literally we could, but we can't create this sort of inviting, inclusive space unless we're able to sit in that space in an emotionally intelligent way, in a self-aware way, right? Because when someone brings you a new idea, because we sort of live in this world that is focused on finite success, winners and losers, we are immediately in a spot where we're defensive, we stonewall, we're critical of the idea, and then we end up holding the other people in contempt. And that is an impossible way to progress. And so it's a real challenge to sort of navigate that and get from defensiveness to inclusiveness, from stonewalling to participating, from criticism to appreciation, and contempt to collegiality. Right? We're really saying, you know what, I get that. I understand your idea. And being able to do that in our society or in education or otherwise, I think is really foundational to any future we might have.
That was pretty cool.
I appreciate that. I wish I could take credit for all of it. I suspect we're going to talk books here in a minute, but there's a gentleman named of John Gottman who runs the Love Lab at the University of Washington. That sort of defensiveness, stonewalling, criticism, and contempt. Those four things really come from his work studying couples. The data are fascinating. I mean, the man can determine in 45 seconds whether a couple will remain together, and he does it with 90% accuracy. And it's because of that sort of defensive stonewalling, criticism, and contempt. And one of my favorite leadership researchers, is a guy by the name of Shan Birch. And Shan studies forgiveness at Gonzaga University. He offers the counter to the four horsemen of the apocalypse. He offers the four angels of our better selves, stealing a little bit from Lincoln, but it was just the counter to those. And I really enjoy seeing that work and challenging people to move away from the four horsemen and closer to the four angels.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
We always love to hear who you're reading and some of the authors that you recommend, because it does push us forward and pushes us to think differently. We appreciate that about you. So what other authors would you recommend?
Well, this one's a little heady, but I find a lot of meaning in these days as we're sort of working on a few things. But let me give you the book by Furch first, and this one's called Forgiveness and Power in the Age of Atrocity: Servant Leadership as a Way of Life. Sort of a long name, but Furch and Forgiveness and Power, we'll find it for you. Really, he's fun to listen to as well. He was a former pro basketball player, and he talks about how he grew up and how he learned all of this from pro basketball to studying. Yeah, really great stuff. But the other one that I've been reading lately and listening to quite a bit, and has really sort of shaped some of the ways we talk about things here at Shenandoah, is a gentleman by the name of Jim Carse, C-A-R-S-E. Most people would be familiar with Simon Sinek, who popularized Jim Carse's work. Carse unfortunately passed away in 2020, but his seminal work was Finite versus Infinite Games. You've probably heard me say that a couple of times. Where finite games are defined by a boundary of some sort, whether that's temporal or physical, like a sports game. It has rules that are agreed to, and they're delivered and monitored by somebody outside of your organization or the game itself. And importantly, it has winners and losers. Right? It ends. Somebody wins the game, and that's it. Right? And our society really celebrates that. Right? Think about all the champions that are out there. Education is the same way, right? I mean, forever, I'm really blessed to have been in a position in my life that I could earn a doctorate. So from here on out, I'm known as Dr. McCoy, and that's a finite victory. But
Right.
when we talk about that, we're looking backwards, right? And we're not looking forwards into how do we serve more people. And the infinite piece of this, takes those things and it says, look, the whole point of doing the work that we do is about inviting more people into the game and trying to play the game in perpetuity. Let's change the rules if we have to change the rules to include more people or to invite more people in, because if we truly enjoy this game we're playing, we will want more people to play it. And unfortunately, we live in a world today, whether it's education or otherwise, that are less apt to be in the infinite space and more apt to be in the finite space. And you can't. Karst tells this story. It's hilarious. But he makes the point that you can have finite games in infinite games, but you can't have an infinite game in a finite game.
In a finite game. Yeah. That
Which
makes
is
sense.
Right. And it's like hard, like, oh, yeah, okay. But the way he tells the story about this discovery, it was mid 80s. And he had his two boys and he was playing. He was at work or at home doing some work, and it was a weekend and the boys were down the hall playing in their room, and he decided to make them some lunch, and he yells down the hall, like, lunch is ready. And he yells it again, lunch is ready. And they don't answer, and he yells again, lunch is ready. And then he stomps down the hall like, I'm angry, Dad. You guys know that feeling. Can you listen to me? And he slams open the bedroom door, and they have tied string to every surface in the room. And they're playing a game, and they're using nicknames. And they say, hey, Bo, Big Weed is here. And it was in that moment where they had given Dad this nickname of Big Weed, where they were basically saying, he's in the game, he's not Dad anymore.
He's not, oh, yeah.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Right. And so having given them a nickname, I think is really fascinating. So he basically, that was his moment of, he'd gone from game theory as a philosopher to really trying to end up at this seminal work. And that's really forced me to do a lot of reflection as well. And there was a period of my life a few years ago where I had the opportunity to go to a digital detox camp for adults.
Oh. Wow.
Yes.
It was so awesome. It was upstate New York, up the Hudson Valley. And when you got there, you had to give up all your electronics and your watch and your name. So you had to have a nickname.
Your name?
Yeah.
Oh.
So you had, like you had no watch, you had no phone, you had no email, none of that stuff. And oh, by the way, the only rule was you couldn't talk about work.
No, yeah, that identity, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I think about that a lot. Like, well, two things. One thing I thought was really hilarious.
Cool.
Yeah, someone could send you an email, but it would then get printed out and put into a stack next to a typewriter in the middle of the woods. And so other people, like the one thing they wanted to do was go do the typewriter. So they would take my email that I got and then type it and then put it in my mailbox, right? Like just issuing the digital piece of it. But the other piece was just, I reflect on this a lot. Like how would you describe yourself if you didn't start with your name and the work you do?
Right. Oh.
Awesome.
Oh.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's deep. You have to really think about that.
How long were you there?
It was only 4 days, but I mean, really,
That's a long time.
Yeah, well, you get there, you leave, but so it's really 2 full days in between. But the programming of it was phenomenal, and it was summer camp basically. I mean, there were games and volleyball and relay races and rock climbing.
Awesome. That is awesome. And then, are you supposed to go with no one else you know, or
no? There were couples there.
You're allowed to go. Okay.
Yeah, and some amazing people. I mean, you didn't know what they did for a living until afterwards. Like, there's one guy, he was our camp counselor for our group, and this guy's one of the best Lego builders in the world.
Oh, so cool.
He builds like these incredible things out of Lego. Right? I keep waiting to see him on that Lego TV show.
Right.
The twins who created the Tushy bidet, which is funny, but it's like this attachment to your toilet seat. They were there, and they're like entrepreneurs. But you wouldn't know that until you get, your back.
Right.
I've read
That's
that
very cool.
most people never reach self-actualization. They just don't get there, right?
Mhm.
And part of that has to do with being self-aware and having that time and space. And I feel like that's part of that philosophy that you were just a part of. I think it's so important. And I think it is important also for growth and innovation.
Sure.
Mhm.
So I love that. I love that. I think we need to do that, Jerri. I think that would be a very
I do
cool
too.
thing.
Is this digital detox still going on?
Yeah, so
Do
I
they
think
still
paused
offer
for a
this?
couple of years. I think they paused, because one of the founders passed from brain cancer, unfortunately. But they've rekindled it in his name. But they're based out of Oakland, and I'm not sure they've come back to the East Coast yet. But it's still alive. Yeah, just Google digital detox and you'll find it.
I mean, it's like that
will.
connection to nature, connection to yourself. Well, and those go hand in hand sometimes. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool. Love it. I mean, I think that's a life lesson for sure.
yeah.
Yes.
I think the thing I really worry a lot about is that we don't create the space in our environments to allow for our faculty and staff and our workers and
Right.
those people who are with us to do those sorts of things.
Yes.
We're so
Yes.
Right.
focused on right here, and
Yes.
Focused. Yes.
And if you can't give them that sort of space to grow and adapt and create it for them or demand it, that they have the time to do it, that's where you get into that defensiveness, right? Because people get tired and they want to argue and battle and fight for themselves, as they should, and we just have to create the space that allows them to have that growth.
All right.
Yes.
So many lessons today on breaking the cycle and moving forward, innovating. I love it. I mean, because you just get on this train and you just go, go, go. And you don't, and then you realize you're just doing the same thing over again instead of this growth and, these great opportunities that you are offering your students. And so I think it's just a great thing. That's the only way that we can offer great opportunities in our own lives for others, is when we have that time to collaborate, to reflect, to move forward. And you guys are putting in that work, and it's more fun that way, isn't it? It
absolutely is. I'm just really blessed to be at a place that wants to do that and wants to be better, and is continuing to push the boundaries of education and isn't afraid to try it. And that's a token to our faculty and their love of what they do.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Good stuff.
Yes. And they're blessed to have you there as their leader. So, and we are happy to have you on again to make us think differently and push us in new directions.
Yeah.
Thank you
That's
so
what
much.
we're going to do when we need that reset.
Yes.
We're going to have Cameron come back.
That's right. He is great at it.
I better do some more reading then, I guess, huh?
Well, hopefully we'll start doing more of the reading too.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you, guys. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I hope we can gather for some beverages at some point in the future.
Let's do it.
Yes, and the next time you're on, we'll see the Tensegrity desk.
I hope so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right.
It's pretty cool.
Very good. Yes, we're ready to see it. Yeah.
Let me go make some adaptive space for myself so I can put it together.
All right.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.